The first rays of dawn crept over the rolling hills of Asante land, casting a golden glow on the small village of Abodom. Dust motes danced in the early morning light, promising another scorching day in the heart of Ghana's countryside. Here, where tradition breathed as deeply as the people themselves, a wedding was not just a union of two souls, but a sacred ceremony that would bind families, honor ancestors, and weave new threads into the fabric of community life. Kwame Mensah stood at the edge of his family's compound, his lean frame silhouetted against the brightening sky. At 28, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who understood his place in the world. His eyes, deep brown and contemplative, traced the familiar paths between the mud brick houses, past the cluster of plantain trees where he had played as a child, to the distant fields where his father and grandfather had worked the land before him. Adwoa Oze was preparing in her family's home, just a stone's throw away. Her hands, adorned with intricate henna patterns that told stories of love and hope, moved methodically as she dressed. The traditional Kente cloth her grandmother had carefully preserved was now draped around her, a vibrant tapestry of gold, green and red that spoke of royal lineage and familial pride. Their love story was not a modern fairy tale, but a deeply rooted connection that had grown like the oldest tree in the village. They had known each other since childhood. Kwame, the son of a respected farmer, and Adwoa, whose father was the village's most renowned storyteller. They had played together as children, shared secrets beneath the shade of old mango trees, and grown into a love that seemed as inevitable as the changing seasons. The entire village buzzed with anticipation. Preparations for the wedding had been underway for months. Women had been cooking for days, preparing massive pots of fufu, jollof rice, and rich stews that would feed hundreds. Men had constructed additional structures to accommodate guests, carefully thatching roofs and arranging seating. Children ran errands, their excitement palpable in every quick step and excited whisper. This was more than just a wedding. It was a community celebration, a continuation of lineage, a sacred promise. In Abodom, marriages were not simply the union of two individuals, but the merging of families, of histories of collective hopes and dreams. Every detail was steeped in meaning, from the specific colors of the Kente cloth to the carefully choreographed wedding rituals that would honor their ancestors. Kwame's mother, Akosua, spent the morning making final preparations. Her hands, weathered from years of hard work, carefully arranged the traditional wedding gifts. Calabash gourds filled with palm wine, intricately woven cloth, golden jewelry that had been passed down through generations, each item a symbol of commitment, of respect, of the deep cultural roots that anchored their community. As the morning progressed, the village transformed. Drums began to sound in the distance, their rhythmic beats a heartbeat of anticipation. Guests started to arrive, dressed in their most beautiful traditional attire, creating a kaleidoscope of color against the earthy backdrop of the village. Kwame and Adwoa stood on the precipice of a moment that would define not just their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. The weight of tradition, the depth of their love, and the expectations of an entire community converged in this single, breathless moment of anticipation. Little did anyone know that this wedding would become a story whispered for generations, a tale of love, truth, and the complex dance between individual choice and communal expectations. The Mensah family's roots in Abodom ran as deep as the ancient baobab trees that dotted the landscape. Kwame's grandfather, Kofi Mensah, had been a respected elder who survived the tumultuous years of colonial rule, preserving their family's dignity and land when many others lost everything. His stories of resistance and resilience had been whispered to Kwame during long nights by the family hearth, lessons of strength etched into his memory like carved symbols on an ancestral staff. Kwame's father, Yor Mensah, had expanded the family's modest farm, transforming their small plot into one of the most productive in the region. He was a man of few words but immense integrity, who believed that a man's worth was measured by his ability to provide for his family and contribute to the community. From him, Kwame learned the value of hard work, patience, and quiet determination. Adwoa's path had been markedly different. Born to Kojo Oze, the village's most celebrated storyteller, and Ernestina, a woman who had briefly worked in Accra's bustling markets, she carried the weight of unexpected challenges from her earliest years. When Adwoa was just 5, her mother left the family, creating a scandal that rippled through the tight-knit community. Rumors swirled, some whispered about a lover in the city, Others spoke of unbearable family pressures, but the truth remained locked away like a closely guarded secret. Kojo Osei raised Adwoa alone, a task that transformed him. Once a vibrant storyteller who could command entire village gatherings with his tales, he became more reserved, channeling all his love and hope into his daughter. He recognized in Adwoa a spirit both fragile and incredibly strong, much like the young palm trees that bend with storms but never break. The village watched Adwoa's growth with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. In a community where a woman's reputation was as precious as water during drought, she could have been marginalized. But Adwoa refused to be defined by her mother's departure. She excelled in the local school, became known for her quick wit and sharp intelligence, and slowly rebuilt her family's respected position. Kwame and Adwoa's connection began in childhood, a friendship that defied the typical boundaries of their community. They first met during one of Kojo's storytelling sessions. Kwame, then 8, was captivated not just by the stories, but by the way Adwoa's eyes would light up, how she would lean forward, absorbing every word as if it were a magical incantation. Their friendship deepened through shared experiences. Kwame would help Adwoa's father during harvest season, carrying water and assisting with small tasks. Kojo saw in Kwame a respectful young man who treated his daughter with genuine care and friendship. As they grew older, their connection transformed, becoming something more profound than mere childhood companionship. The village elders began to take notice. Akosua Mensah, Kwame's mother, was particularly observant. She saw in Adwoa not just a potential daughter-in-law, but a woman of substance. Adwoa's ability to overcome societal whispers, her determination to excel, and her deep respect for community traditions impressed her. Key figures in their lives played crucial roles in their journey. Uncle Mensah, Kwame's paternal uncle and a local teacher, became a mentor to both. He represented a bridge between traditional values and progressive thinking, often mediating discussions and offering wisdom that balanced respect for culture with individual aspirations. Grandmother Emma, the oldest living member of the Osei family, was another significant influence. Despite her advanced age, her mind remained sharp. She saw in Kwame and Adwoa a reflection of true partnership, a union not just of two individuals, but of two families, two histories, two sets of dreams. As their wedding day approached, the entire community watched with a mixture of excitement and anticipation. Kwame and Adwoa represented more than just themselves. They were a symbol of hope, of continuity, of the delicate balance between honoring tradition and embracing individual destiny. Little did anyone know that this wedding would soon become a moment of profound revelation, challenging everything they believed about love, truth, and community. The morning of the wedding descended on Abodom like a living, breathing entity. Long before the sun fully rose, the village hummed with an electric anticipation that seemed to vibrate through every mud brick wall and between every carefully planted cassava plant. In Adwoa's family compound, women moved with synchronized precision. Her aunts and cousins transformed the modest family home into a whirlwind of preparation. Elaborate kente cloths were spread out, each thread carefully chosen to represent family history and future hopes. The older women chanted softly, performing age-old rituals that would bless the union, their voices creating a melodic backdrop to the morning's activities. Adwoa sat silently as her hair was meticulously braided, adorned with delicate gold threads and small cowrie shells, a tradition passed down through generations. Her grandmother Eyama watched from a corner, her weathered eyes holding a complexity of emotions. There was pride in her gaze, but something else too, a flicker of unspoken worry that darted across her face like a passing shadow. Remember, her Aunt Comfort whispered while applying intricate henna designs to Adwoa's hands. A woman's strength is not just in her beauty, but in her ability to hold her family together. The words carried multiple meanings, a subtle reference perhaps to the lingering story of Adwoa's mother's departure years ago. Meanwhile, in the Mensah compound, preparations were equally intense. Kwame's father, Yor, performed morning libations, pouring palm wine on the ground to honor their ancestors. His movements were deliberate, his face a mask of controlled emotion. The family's respected elder, Uncle Mensah, supervised the traditional preparations with a keen eye, ensuring every ritual was performed with absolute precision. Young boys ran between compounds, delivering messages and small gifts. Drummers began tuning their instruments, the deep resonant sounds of traditional talking drums gradually filling the air. Each beat seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the community, announcing the significance of the day. The wedding would be a grand affair, a testament to both families standing in the community. Livestock had been specially prepared, goats and chickens selected weeks in advance, now ready to be transformed into elaborate dishes. Women stirred massive cooking pots, the aroma of spices and slow-cooked meats creating an olfactory landscape of celebration. But beneath the jubilant surface, subtle tensions simmered. Kwame's mother, Akosua, seemed unusually distracted. Her conversations with her sister-in-law were hushed, punctuated by worried glances. Something weighed on her mind, a secret that threatened to disrupt the carefully orchestrated day. Kojo Osei, Adwoa's father, moved between moments of profound pride and unexplained melancholy. When he thought no one was watching, his eyes would grow distant, as if recalling a memory that both haunted and defined him. The storyteller who could captivate entire villages with his narratives now seemed trapped in his own unspoken story. As noon approached, traditional marriage brokers arrived, their role critical in formally connecting the two families. They carried symbolic gifts, cloth, drinks, and other items that represented the economic and social contract being formed. Their interactions were carefully choreographed, each gesture laden with cultural significance. The village elder who would officiate the traditional ceremony arrived, his presence immediately commanding respect. Dressed in pristine white cloth, with a golden kente stole, he carried with him an air of spiritual authority. His arrival signaled that the most critical part of the day was approaching. Kwame, dressed in a stunning combination of traditional and modern attire, a richly embroidered kente cloth wrapped around him, complemented by a tailored jacket that spoke to contemporary sensibilities. His hands, though steady, betrayed a slight tremor. Was it excitement? Nerves? Or something deeper? Adwoa's preparation was equally magnificent. Her dress, a combination of traditional kente and delicate lace, represented a perfect metaphor for her journey, traditional roots interwoven with modern aspirations. The veil that would cover her face was an heirloom, passed down through generations, carrying with it countless unspoken family stories. As the afternoon light began to soften, casting long shadows across the village, a sense of inevitability descended. Something was coming, a revelation, a moment of truth that would change everything. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Little did anyone know how profoundly this day would challenge everything they believed about love, family, and truth. The traditional wedding ceremony unfolded with the precision of a meticulously choreographed dance. Drummers created a rhythmic heartbeat that seemed to pulse through the entire village, their sounds a mixture of celebration and something deeper, a primal communication that spoke of more than just joy. Kwame stood at the center of the gathering, his posture rigid with a combination of excitement and unexpected tension. The village elder began the traditional blessing, his voice rising and falling in a melodic incantation that honored ancestors, celebrated the union, and called upon the spirits to bless the marriage. Adwoa approached, her steps measured and deliberate. The intricate kente cloth caught the afternoon light, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that seemed to tell a story of their own. Her family's traditional veil covered her face completely, a sacred barrier between her current self and her soon-to-be married identity. The moment of unveiling approached, a critical ritual that symbolized complete trust, vulnerability, and the true coming together of two souls. Kwame's hands trembled slightly as he reached to lift the veil, a gesture witnessed by hundreds of expectant eyes. Time seemed to slow. As the veil began to rise, a collective intake of breath swept through the crowd. First, her delicate chin became visible, then her lips, then her nose, and finally her eyes. Kwame froze. The eyes looking back at him were not Adwoa's. They were familiar, yet entirely wrong. Darker, older, carrying a history that spoke of pain and secrets long buried. "Mama," he whispered, the word escaping before he could stop it. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Adwoa, or the woman everyone believed was Adwoa, stood perfectly still. Her mother, the woman who had abandoned the family years ago, somehow impossibly standing before him in a wedding dress. "What is happening?" Uncle Mensah's voice cut through the stunned silence. Kojo Osei, Adwoa's father, looked like he might collapse. His face drained of color, years of carefully maintained composure crumbling in an instant. The woman spoke, her voice a mixture of desperation and defiance. "I had to make things right," she said softly. "I had to come back and fix what I broke." Chaos erupted. Whispers became shouts. Family members began speaking over each other, a cacophony of shock and confusion. Kwame stood frozen, the veil still partially in his hand, his mind struggling to process the impossible scene before him. "Where is Adwoa?" he finally managed to ask, his voice breaking. Ernestina Adwoa's long-lost mother took a deep breath. "She is safe," she said. "But this marriage cannot happen. Not like this." The village elder, who had been conducting the ceremony, looked utterly bewildered. Traditions were being violated in ways no one could have anticipated. A wedding, perhaps the most sacred of community events, was unraveling before their eyes. Kwame's mother, Akosua, stepped forward. Her face told a story of knowledge long kept secret. "You knew," she said to her husband and brother-in-law. It wasn't a question. Your Mensa and Uncle Mensa exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Years of a shared secret hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "What have you done?" Kwame demanded, looking between his father and uncle. The truth began to emerge in fragments. Ernestina had not simply abandoned her family years ago. There was a deeper story, a story of family connections far more complicated than anyone had realized. "Adwoa is not who you think she is," Ernestina said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "And this wedding cannot happen." The implications hung in the air like a thundercloud. An entire community's expectations, a lifetime of preparations, a love story years in the making, all suspended in a single, breathless moment of revelation. Kwame looked around. Hundreds of eyes watched him, waiting, judging. The weight of tradition, of family honor, of personal choice pressed down on him like a physical force. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the wedding ground, the carefully constructed narrative of two families began to unravel. Secrets that had been buried for years started to emerge, threatening to change everything they thought they knew about love, family, and identity. The wedding had become something else entirely, a moment of reckoning. The wedding ground transformed into a battlefield of emotions. Families clustered in hushed, angry groups, their whispers creating a low, dangerous hum that seemed to vibrate through the earth itself. Kwame stood at the center of the storm, a man suddenly unmoored from everything he believed to be true. Uncle Mensa was the first to break the silence. "We must discuss this privately," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of carefully guarded secrets. But privacy was impossible now. Every ear in the village was straining to hear, every eye fixed on the dramatic scene unfolding. Ernestina Adwoa's mother stood with a composure that seemed both defiant and fragile. "I did what I had to do," she repeated, her words a mantra of self-preservation. But her eyes betrayed a deeper vulnerability, a lifetime of pain compressed into this single, explosive moment. Kwame's internal world was a hurricane of emotions. Confusion, anger, betrayal. The love he thought he knew seemed to be disintegrating before his eyes, revealing layers of complexity he had never imagined. His father and uncle's complicit silence spoke volumes. They had known something, had been protecting something, for years. "Where is she?" Kwame demanded, grabbing his father's arm. "Where is the real Adwoa?" Your Mensa's response was measured, controlled. "Some truths are not meant to be discovered all at once," he said, a cryptic response that only fueled Kwame's growing anger. The community's reaction was a complex tapestry of emotions. Some elders muttered about curses and bad spirits. Younger members looked confused, caught between traditional expectations and a growing sense that something profound was happening. Kojo Aze, Adwoa's father, looked like a man who had been carrying an impossible weight for years. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "It was to protect her," he said, looking directly at Ernestina. "Everything I did was to protect her." Rumors began to spread like wildfire. Some whispered about family secrets, about hidden adoptions, about sins that needed redemption. The wedding feast, carefully prepared over days, sat untouched, a testament to a celebration now turned to ash. Uncle Mensa pulled Kwame aside into a small area away from the main gathering. "Some stories are complicated," he began, "and some truths are better left hidden." "I want the whole truth," Kwame demanded, his voice a mixture of pain and determination. The truth emerged in fragments. Adwoa was not Kojo's biological daughter. She was the result of a complicated history involving multiple families, a history that stretched back decades. The woman everyone knew as Adwoa was actually another woman entirely, a carefully constructed identity designed to protect the real Adwoa. But why, Kwame asked, his world spinning. The answer was both simple and impossibly complex. It was about protection, about survival, about preserving family honor in a community where reputation was everything. Ernestina's return was no accident. She had been tracking her daughter's life, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. The wedding was her chosen moment of revelation, a dramatic intervention designed to prevent a marriage built on a foundation of lies. The community watched and judged. Some saw Ernestina as a disruptive force, others as a mother finally taking responsibility. The traditional leaders looked troubled, understanding that this revelation challenged fundamental community structures. But Kwame's mother, Akosua, had known parts of the truth for years. Her silence now seemed both a protection and a betrayal. "Some secrets are carried to protect those we love," she told her son, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. As the day turned to evening, the wedding ground became a place of reckoning. Traditions hung in delicate balance. Personal integrity collided with family expectations. The carefully maintained facade of two families began to crumble, revealing a complexity that no one had anticipated. Kwame faced an impossible choice. Continue with a wedding built on a lie? Reject everything he thought he knew? Challenge the very fabric of his community's expectations? The drums that had celebrated moments ago now seemed to beat with a different rhythm, a rhythm of judgment, of revelation, of a community forced to confront its deepest secrets. "What happens now?" Kwame asked, looking around at the faces of his family, his community, his entire known world. No one had an answer. The sun began to set on Abodom, casting long shadows that seemed to hold the weight of unspoken stories. A wedding day had become something else entirely, a moment of truth, of reckoning, of understanding that some stories are far more complicated than they first appear. The days following the wedding that never was became a crucible of transformation for Abodom. Kwame withdrew from the community, seeking solitude in the vast farmlands that had been his sanctuary since childhood. His days were spent walking among the cassava and plantain trees, wrestling with a truth that had shattered everything he believed about his identity, his family, and his future. Uncle Mensa was the first to truly reach him. One crisp morning, as dawn broke over the misty fields, he found Kwame sitting beneath an ancient baobab tree, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Truth is rarely pure and never simple," Uncle Mensa said, settling beside him. "Our community has always understood that family is more than blood. It is a choice, a commitment." Kwame's response was quiet, laden with pain. "How do I trust anything now? How do I know who I am?" The real Adwoa's story began to emerge. She had been born to a different family, caught in a complex web of economic struggle and social expectations. The woman Kwame thought he knew was a carefully crafted protection, a life constructed to shield the real Adwoa from circumstances that could have destroyed her. Ernestina's return was not an act of destruction, but of ultimate protection. She had spent years tracking her daughter, ensuring her safety, creating a life that would protect her from the vulnerabilities that had once fractured their family. The community's initial shock gradually transformed into a more nuanced understanding. Traditional leaders convened multiple meetings, discussing the deeper implications of family, identity, and truth. What emerged was a profound conversation about the nature of belonging that went far beyond blood relations. Kojo Ose, the storyteller who had raised the woman known as Adwoa, approached Kwame with a vulnerability he had never shown before. "I loved her as my own," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Every story I told, every lesson I shared, it was to give her a life, a future, a protection I could not give my own biological child." Weeks turned into months. Slowly, painfully, healing began. Kwame's parents revealed the full extent of their involvement. They had known parts of the truth, had been silent partners in a protection strategy that spanned years. Their silence was not a betrayal, but a complex act of love and community preservation. The real Adwoa emerged from the shadows. She was a young woman of remarkable strength, who had lived multiple lives to survive. Her meeting with Kwame was not a romantic reunion, but a profound moment of mutual understanding. "I never knew the full extent of what was done to protect me," she told him during their first real conversation. "But I understand now that love takes many forms." The community began to heal. What could have been a devastating scandal became a transformative moment. Families that had been separated began to reconnect. The artificial boundaries that had divided them started to dissolve. Ernestina, once vilified for her past, found a path to redemption. Her decades of silent protection of her daughter became a testament to a mother's love that transcended traditional understanding. Kwame's journey of self-reflection was the most profound. He realized that identity was not a fixed point, but a continuous journey of understanding. His love for the woman he thought he knew transformed into a deeper appreciation for human complexity. The village elders used this moment as an opportunity for growth. They organized community discussions about family, truth, and the evolving nature of belonging. What emerged was a more nuanced understanding of community, one that valued protection, truth, and compassion over rigid traditional expectations. By the time a year had passed, Abodom had changed. The wedding that never was became a pivotal moment in the community's history. A story of scandal transformed into a lesson of understanding, forgiveness, and the complex nature of love. Kwame found a new purpose. He began working with young people in the community, creating support systems for families facing complex challenges. His experience had taught him that judgment was easy, but true understanding required compassion. The woman he had intended to marry found her own path. She pursued education, supported by the community that had once been prepared to celebrate her wedding. Her resilience became an inspiration to many. As another wedding season approached in Abodom, the community looked different. Families spoke more openly. Secrets began to lose their power. The rigid boundaries that had once defined their social interactions started to soften. "We are more than our mistakes," the village elder would say during community gatherings. "We are defined by how we respond to truth, how we love, how we heal." And in the golden light of the African sun, Abodom continued to live, to love, to transform. 5 years after the wedding that never was, Abodom had become a testament to transformation. The village that once lived by rigid traditions now understood that true strength lay in adaptability, compassion, and honest dialogue. Kwame stood at the edge of the community center he had helped establish, a place dedicated to supporting families navigating complex personal challenges. His work had become a bridge between traditional values and modern understanding, helping families find healing through truth rather than secrecy. The original characters had found unexpected paths. Ernestina, once an outcast, now worked alongside community leaders, her years of silent protection recognized as an act of profound maternal love. Kojo Osei continued to be a storyteller, but his stories had changed now. They were tales of resilience, of families reimagined, of love that transcended biological boundaries. The real Adwoa had become a teacher, her experiences transforming into a powerful mission of education and empowerment. She frequently spoke to young women about identity, choice, and the courage to define oneself beyond societal expectations. On a warm afternoon, much like the day of the unfinished wedding, the community gathered. It was not for a celebration of union, but for a dialogue about family, truth, and healing. Kwame watched as younger generations engaged in conversations that would have been unimaginable just years before. We learned Uncle Mensa would often say, that love is not about perfection, but about understanding. That family is not about blood, but about choice. That truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a comfortable lie. The baobab tree where Kwame once sat, lost and confused, now stood as a silent witness to the community's transformation. Its roots, deep and intertwined, became a metaphor for the connections that truly matter, connections built on honesty, compassion, and mutual respect. As the sun began to set, casting the same golden light that had illuminated that fateful wedding day years ago, Kwame reflected on the journey. What had once seemed like a devastating moment of betrayal had become a powerful catalyst for change. The moral was clear: true integrity is not about maintaining appearances, but about having the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Love is not about possession or expectation, but about understanding and growth. A community is strongest when it chooses compassion over judgment, dialogue over silence. In the distance, children played, their laughter mixing with the sounds of drums and conversation. Abodom had become more than a village. It was a living example of how truth, when embraced with love, could heal even the deepest wounds.